Good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Ms. Goodell, if you would call the roll, please.
Yes, let's see, Mr. Lawrence?
Here.
Mr. Reitinger?
Here.
Ms. Ward?
Here.
And Mr. Webb?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if you all will rise with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First, I want to thank everyone for coming out for the budget work session that we have going on this evening. Looking forward to hearing from those of you who will be speaking in a little bit. But I will, first items up is the FY19 budget update, and I will turn that over to Dr. Noonan.
All right. Thank you, and good evening, Mr. Chair and board members and members of the community. Thanks for coming to our friendly confines here at Central Office. This is going to be where we're going to have our meetings from now on because Chambers is going to be closed for a while, so settle in and glad you're here. I want to first of all say thanks for being here and being prepared to sort of engage in a conversation. It's my understanding that in previous budget cycles, there has been an opportunity for our community members who represent different committees and different constituencies to come before the board through public comment and give a 3-minute overview of what they are hoping for as part of public comment again. And I thought this year it would be potentially more useful to engage in a bit longer conversation, a matter of minutes as opposed to a matter of hours with each member of their respective organization. So that's why tonight we have a number of folks that are here to speak on behalf of their representative organizations. With that, I do want to just make a couple of opening remarks before I turn it over to Deirdre McLaughlin, our Chief Financial Officer and Chief Operating Officer. And some of it is to, I think, maybe manage expectations a little bit, just in terms of the board and the community and sort of where we're headed. I've had multiple opportunities over the course of the last 2 weeks to meet with folks to talk about the budget process. 2 weeks ago, I had a chance to do a community outreach meeting at Mary Riley Stiles Library. We did one at Mary Ellen Henderson. I've now had a chance to speak to Mount Daniel Elementary School teachers, to Jesse Thackeray teachers, and also to George Mason teachers about our budget. And the truth of the matter for us is that we are in an interesting time, I think, in the City of Falls Church with respect to our capital program versus our operational program. And I don't mean to couch it in terms of in conflict with each other, but I do think it's important to note that because of our significant capital program that's going on between the bond for Jesse Thackeray, the bond for Mount Daniel, and the bond coming up for the high school, it does put us in a position where our operational costs are eaten into a little bit based on what's happening with the capital side of the program, if you will. I've tried to also sort of express where I can that those are two significantly different pots of money, right? So we've got the capital program and we have the operational side, and sort of never the twain shall meet. So we can't take any of the bond money and use it for operations and vice versa, with very, very few exceptions. And so sort of setting the stage early for, because of the building that's going on and the capital side, we are somewhat constrained or significantly constrained in our operations. So my hope tonight is to sort of think about this evening in 4 parts, sort of my opening comments about where I'm hoping that we can go with respect to having these work sessions, and this is just the beginning of many work sessions to come. I'm going to turn it over, like I say, for a presentation, then we'll have our committee members come up, and then at the end I'd like to hear from the board members a little bit about some perhaps common themes that have come up, some questions that have come up from from listening to the folks that have come forward. I'd also like you to sort of listen to the conversations that we're having tonight, or the conversations that you're having tonight, to look for connections to the triennial plan. That has been part of what our work is. And sort of with that in mind, I also want to say out loud and for the record that because our budget this year is, in my perception and perspective, remarkably tight, there's sort of a longer game here at play, and that is that our triennial plan is a 3-year plan. So the decisions that are made in this budget cycle don't necessarily mean that if we don't get everything we want, we won't get everything we want ever. I think we need to look at this over a multiple year experience to really work towards those goals that we have in the triennial plan. And an example of that is in the triennial plan, we've said, here are some things that we hope to accomplish in 3 years. We know that we're not going to be able to do some of that work in the first year that we are together. But if we can begin to meet out some of these obligations to our triennial plan over the next couple of years, sort of take a long-term perspective around our budget, even as it relates to this year, I think we all may be better served and help us sort of consolidate our thinking as a team moving forward. I hope that makes sense to you, and I hope that the plan for tonight makes sense. Again, the idea was to allow some folks in the community to have a little bit more time than just the 3 minutes, and perhaps even ask you for some questions or ask them questions as they come up. I did, when we sent out the information, we did say that it was going to be roughly 7 minutes or so. Again, it's a matter of minutes, but it is more than double than what they've had previously, and we'll try to keep time as best we can. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it over to Ms. McLaughlin for some updates on our FY19 budget, unless there are any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one question as we go in this, so we could get the most out of it.
Yes.
Is there any common theme that you would like everybody to hit as they go into this? Any particular issue or...
That I would like them to hit?
So that we would have commonality across the stakeholder population?
We hadn't given any guidance as to what we would want them to think of with respect to commonality. My suspicion is that there are some common elements that may come through. If I were to posit, I would submit to you that probably compensation will be one of those themes that may come through. I do think that class size will likely come through. And there are some things that as they come out and as we work through the budget, I also want to submit to you that we may not need to address because we may be in pretty good shape. So one of the things that I'm hoping to hear too are in those common themes, are there some things that we can say, you know what, that's sort of taken care of this year. We don't need to work on that, but we do need to work on this, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Noonan. The purpose of this presentation, and it is brief because there's a lot of other things to discuss tonight, is just to bring the board up to date on where we are with the budget. And I want to just up front say that this is the work of your new COO, Kristen Michael, and Michelle Kopic, the Budget and Finance Director, who we've all worked together to put this together. The budget remains very much a work in progress. There are a lot of moving parts at the moment, and a lot of things are going on. But we do know more and more every day, and things it is coming together. So what we're going to talk about tonight is we're going to look at briefly student enrollment growth. We're going to talk a little bit about the assumptions that we're working with that go into the budget, and we're going to end with sort of a status to give you a picture of where we are. Okay? So this is a chart you've seen. I don't think we need to talk about it too much, but I do think the unevenness of our growth is something that is affecting our budget, and I just want to remind people that when you have these uneven projections, as we had in 2007 and 8, it takes a little while for it to smooth out. But the real purpose of putting this up here is I think it's worthwhile to start by focusing on this kind of trend in context and what it means. So, what the numbers show when you look at the last 3 years is that our overall growth rate has been fairly consistent. It's just been disorderly. It hasn't been at all even. When you look at last year, the student growth was more than twice what we projected. This year, it's almost flat. If you take, and looking at 3 years is a near-term measure of what you should be expecting. The average student enrollment growth over this period has been 71 students, and our 2019 projection is a growth of 63 students. So what I think we can say is it's been wildly uneven, our enrollment growth, but it's been consistent in terms of absolute numbers. And I think our enrollment growth projection of 63 is pretty good. I mean, I think that's a very likely scenario. So, moving on to more current information. This isn't the one. No, this is the old one.
Okay.
Can we
Yep.
hook on?
Yep.
Okay. I'm gonna come down.
Sorry, gang.
Sorry. While you're doing that, I can start talking about, the governor's budget came out yesterday, and the revenue information came out late last night. And what we are seeing is that our state revenue is not really being kind to FCCPS. And this relates directly to the unevenness of our revenue growth. We're going to lose in this year, according to the projections that the state has given us, $160,000. And next year, our 19 projection is just slightly less. It's 44,000 less than the projection that we had in our budget for 18. So what this means is we had thought that the re-benchmarking process, I had thought we would lose some money in the current year because of the low growth. But it was unexpected to see no gain at all in the first year of the new biennium. Now, you look at it and you say, why is this happening? Well, it's happening because we had flat enrollment growth in 18, and it's happening because we project 63 additional students in 19, but the state does their own projection based on what they measure, and they've measured our growth at 38 students. You have the option, I don't think it's a good one, to say we think the state is wrong and we're going to budget for additional state aid. I think it's more prudent to stay with the state's estimate. State sales tax is projected to decrease. That is not a function of anything, our enrollment. It's just a function of the state sales tax revenue projections. And the other thing that was not in this budget that's unusual is that the state budget didn't include any salary supplement. Salaries go up over time, and you would expect at the beginning of the biennium there to be some sort of supplement. There is one in the second half of 2020, but nothing in 19. So the state revenue is not going to solve any of our problems. It is just not a good picture. All right, so here's what we're in the middle of right now. We're looking at school-based staffing. And what we're doing is we're aligning school budgeted positions with our planning factors. And as a result of this process, we're looking at some of our planning factors and either streamlining them. Some of them just on their face aren't as clear as they could be, so we're putting clarity around it, and that will be part of the budget process and the budget information that the board receives. We're looking at all of the other revenue accounts, baseline expenditure budgets, what utility prices are doing and cost of trash removal and things like that. And then we're reviewing and evaluating budget requests, which will be part of what you all will be looking at tonight. So these are numbers you've seen. Well, most of them you've seen. We have a working assumption going into this that there'll be a 3% cost of living adjustment in the budget. It is just a placeholder. It's where we're starting, and I think it is safe to say it is something that the city has talked about putting that in their budget. Dr. Noonan has talked about doing something similar. We talked about the changes in benefit costs at the last work session, and the city had shown a 10% increase on health insurance increases. We had projected a 15%. We had spoken to the same people, but we had gotten different information. And I think that the 10% increase may be the result of some plan design changes that hadn't been discussed when we made the inquiry. So what I have here for our benefit cost increases is the lower 10% benefit increase. So I think it's a good estimate, but it could change. And then we had talked about some school-based positions that we saw that were needed to really, it was not to accommodate student growth so much as to address specific needs or planning factor formulas that would add some staff to schools. So here is where we see the impact of the city's transfer amount. If the city were to give us the 2% transfer amount, which has been discussed, that would give the school division an additional $800,000. And based on what we know now, based on the assumptions that we've talked about so far, it would leave the division with a deficit of about a little over $900,000. At a 3% transfer increase, the deficit goes to about $500,000. So what this means is you've got to look at the obvious options to close the gap, and that could be additional revenue from other sources. It could be budget cuts. It could be use of ending balance. It could be some combination, all of which will be explored as we get closer to what our bottom line really is. So what we have not talked about at all in this budget are the unfunded budget requests, the budget requests that have come in that we haven't vetted, we haven't even costed all of them. But there is a discussion of whether or not there should be STEP for employees. There is a need for coordinating our LEAP program for English language learners. And there has been a request for funding for online high school course offerings. And then, of course, you're going to hear requests tonight, which is the primary purpose of the meeting. So we are here at questions, and I'm happy to answer any if...
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Mr. Castillo?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that presentation, Ms. McLaughlin. Could you tell us who I think you said 5 additional slots, what those positions are that were?
If for the school-based?
Yeah.
First pass, this is where we are. There's, I believe there's 2 in the middle school, 2 in special ed, and a half at... I think the other half was originally slated for the middle school, so 2.5 and 2. Now we're going through planning factors, so we're relooking at all of these, and that may change as we go forward. But I think there will be some additional school-based positions.
Right, and with respect to the state contribution.
Yes, the state
They-
revenue?
Yeah, the state revenue, 38 is the growth that they project.
Correct.
Let's say it comes in at our number, will we get additional?
Yes. there
True-up
will be-
money?
There will be additional money that you would receive in 2019.
Okay, and also, so in terms of unfunded budget requests, how does professional development fit into?
That is on the list of things that we're looking at. There have been requests for some professional development, additional professional development money. Not huge amounts, but yes, that is one of the things that's under consideration.
Okay, thanks.
Question.
Ms. Ward?
Yeah, with respect to the online high school course offerings, are these additional course offerings, or are these ones that are already existing?
That actually is more about materials for the online course than it is about the course offerings themselves.
But if those materials weren't funded, would we still be able to have the classes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Other question, Mr. Lawrence?
Actually, Justin took one about state aid. So if they're wrong and it comes in higher, we automatically get it back
Yes.
later
I mean,
without having to do anything.
Yes.
Okay, and there's no process now to make the argument to them that looking at our historical figure of, 71, 38 is just absurd, and getting them to change their mind.
Well, they're not going to change their mind, but they welcome you to change your mind. If you want to say that their projections are wrong, and there are certain times when school divisions do say they know they're what's like sales tax is one where they're almost always higher than you actually get, and most school divisions will reduce their estimate because they're traditionally high. But yeah, you can make a change, but you do it at some risk.
Well, what you're doing is you're not convincing them to change
not.
their mind. You're making a bet that you're going to be
Yes.
right and recoup it
Yes.
in the end. So that's a very different thing.
Yeah, and it's not a lot of money, the difference. We don't get, with our high LCI, we don't get a lot of money for,
Right. Well, I mean, if you add those two together, that was what, 200,000?
Yes.
Basically, which is,
yeah.
you know.
Well, the big loss this year was due to the flat enrollment growth.
Right.
Because they had estimated it at a good bit higher for this year, and that's what they based our projection on when they gave us our estimates last year.
Okay. And then on the sales tax decrease estimate, is that statewide or local?
Well, we've looked at it only in context of us, to be honest. We just got this data, so I can't answer that, but
Okay.
I'd be happy to look.
Okay.
I think
well,
it
no,
is.
it seems like Falls Church seems to be doing well in terms of, commercial development. So it seems like our state tax that revenue would be increasing. So my question was, are they looking at a decrease simply because the state as a whole isn't doing so well, as opposed to basing it on us?
I don't know. We just got it, so I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. And the question I had was asked by both Mr. Lawrence and Mr. Castillo. Okay. All right. Dr.
Great.
Noonan?
So we would like to invite some of our folks up this evening, and we would like to start with our representatives from Seek, Peak, and EEK to join us here at the table and share with us your thoughts about your priorities and some of the conversations that you all have had with your respective committees. Come on up.
All committees at the same time?
All three of you, yeah. We got 3 seats available.
Good evening.
Yeah. So what we'd like to do is offer you sort of 7 minutes each. And if there's some interplay between the two groups, that's fine too. But looking at about 21 minutes or so across the board. So I will turn it over to Dave.
Great. Hi, I'm Dave Sikora. I'm representing Peak this evening. And I think there probably will be a bit of overlap between what we have to say as well as Seek and Eek. And this year, we kind of bulleted ours as a group from Peak. And we didn't necessarily prioritize them on the handout that I sent to Marty, because they're all equally important to us. But above and beyond everything else, as Dr. Noonan and everybody said, compensation is going to be at the highest point of our list, and we really recommend a full step on the salary scale. I know that is hopeful and probably not going to happen, but I think it's of the utmost importance to all of us. In addition to a cost of living adjustment, I think the step is really important because it affects everybody in the long term. If people are moving to different school districts, the steps are important when they're moving to other positions. That helps. It's very important on retirement and experience and that sort of thing. But on the flip side of that, cost of living is very important because it takes into account the people that are at the highest levels of the highest steps that aren't receiving those step increases anymore. They're in the holding pattern or they've kind of maxed out. So it's equitable to be able to provide both of those to staff. We continue to recommend that the school board and superintendent continue to ensure small class sizes. Many classes at the schools have exceeded school board guidelines, and I think that fluctuates based on enrollment and that sort of thing, but it's something to always keep an eye on, because when the sizes of the classes are too large, it can negatively impact instruction, student achievement, and safety, and that looks very different at the different schools, from lab safety and high school science classes to just the fact that 25 kindergartners don't actually fit inside the coat room to be able to hang up their coats, and every school in between there. Peak recommends that FCCPS strives to continue to be a K-12 IB continuum school division, a premier one nationally and internationally, and adequate funding and resources are going to be required to sustain that goal and to keep that moving throughout. FCCPS would like, or Peak would like FCCPS to assess the equity between school buildings in regards to staffing, as far as encore teachers, making sure that the coverage is correct for the schools, number of preps that each teacher is responsible for, and EPED pay, coaching, visual arts, team leaders, that sort of thing. They're a little bit different. If you look at them, they're a little bit disjointed between team leaders at the elementary school versus middle school and high school. Different coaching positions are very different. Obviously, that's not really taking into account the different responsibilities, but looking at it, I think reassessing that would be a very helpful thing for a lot of the staff to see happening. Peak recommends that an effort is made to support professional development. We talked about that a little bit, but specifically, I think tuition reimbursement, which was a really nice benefit that staff benefited from for many years, that hasn't been a part of the benefits package recently, and to work out a way to increase tuition waivers available to teachers and staff at UVA and Virginia Tech. I think all of the in-house professional development is very important. Being able to send teachers to conferences and other workshops like that are very important. But I Peak feels that being able to reinstate tuition waivers so that teachers can develop their craft, seek other endorsements, pursue advanced degrees in the best way possible, I think would really be to the benefit of the entire division. Peak recommends that 2 weeks paid family leave is provided to mothers and fathers who are welcoming a new baby. This is another one of those benefits that I know is extended in other divisions, surrounding divisions, and I think would really set Falls Church City apart at being proactive and very progressive in taking care of employees in that regard. Peak recommends that full funding for national board certification is reinstated. The state grant is what it is. The state compensation for staff is what it is, but I think the school division can do a little bit more, and that's another great way for professional development, but also to ensure that staff here at Falls Church City are being supported to be able to pursue their own professional development and to maintain a high level of professionalism here. And Peak also recommends that elementary paraprofessional hours are restored to 8.0, up from 7.5. The equity in that is very difficult to explain when some of the paraprofessionals are at 7.5 and other paraprofessionals with the exact same job description are at 8.0 on the pay scale. The equity amongst classrooms is out of balance with that, and Peak recommends that is restored. So we do acknowledge that, with multiple construction projects underway or beginning in the new future, an increase in school funds from City Council to fund the schools will be difficult. But Peak is concerned that as student population continues to increase and new programs are implemented at schools, the burden of the daily expectations placed on professional staff is also growing. We have experienced growth in student needs within special populations as well, and I think the adequate resources need to be provided to accommodate that. An expansion of services, we must fund these services required to accommodate these changes. And without increasing professional staff, support staff, physical facilities, and other educational resources, that we're really spending down on our district's greatest asset, our human capital. That was kind of the message that we came up with from Peak is more is being asked of the same number of people. Resources haven't been expanded to meet the needs and of the expectations for staff. And I think, whether you want to call it morale or burnout or anything of that nature, it's very real at the buildings, and we have had a lot of discussions from Jesse Thackeray all the way up to Mason that there's been a gradual erosion of morale in that regard, because teachers are really being asked to do more with less. It's been a refrain that we've repeated several years in a row, and in the budget season, but it continues to be very real, and it hasn't improved in some regards. So. We recommend a strong effort be made in retaining these highly qualified, experienced staff that we're so fortunate to work with every day and to provide, great education to all the students that come through our schools. And we also feel that an active recruiting process to bring in the best candidates would also be an important addition to what we're doing too. So we're very thankful for the opportunity, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's got about a half a minute for questions.
Oh, perfect.
Any questions by anyone for Mr. Lawrence?
Just a few. One, I guess going forward, it's not really a question for you. It's just some things here, well, everything here has a cost. So things like, restoring full funding for national board certification. If you could just explain to people what that actually means, by teacher or just overall, and maybe not tonight. I mean, I realize I time out in 13 days, but,
Well,
just-
it's about 16.
There's a few different things, and sorry to interrupt, Dr.
Nope,
Noonan.
that's okay, go ahead.
No.
You want me to speak to it?
Oh, I had a total cost, but go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I was just saying, one of the things Falls Church at one point was given $2,000 per year for being nationally board certified. A few years ago, we went down to $1,000. And then as far as the process of becoming nationally board certified, at one time, the division paid for any individual who wanted to go through that process and the support that went along with that. We have Elizabeth Casey who does that for us. We still have Elizabeth Casey, but we've done it more on a group of 4 to 5 individuals are able to the last time, and that cohort just finished. And so next year we would start another one if budget allows for it. So that's kind of where we are as far as the
And I would also
fully
ask that
funding it.
Peak would also recommend to look at surrounding districts and what they do and how they compensate and support their staff going through the process as well. For instance, in Arlington, on successful completion, teachers are given a step as part of the completion process in addition to whatever the school board decides to do. So, for instance, I can speak personally to it. My wife just successfully passed it, and she's going to earn 2 steps this year on the pay scale, which is a huge incentive that really it does affect a lot.
So just so to give you some further information, just as an example, it would be $16,000 to do the additional $1,000 for the 16 nationally board certified teachers. Things like 2 weeks of paid for families who are welcoming a new baby would be about $175,000. The cost would be about $8,754 based on an average and estimating 20 births among the staff, for example, which is a guess.
It's about right.
Additional 30 minutes for our paraprofessionals to take them from 7.5 to 8-hour day would be $221,500. So it just gives you a sense and flavor of what the costs are. But those are all part of the conversations that we're having too to sort of begin to narrow the field.
And then just 2 other quick ones. One, you say that many classes exceeded class size. Many? I know we had some kindergarten classes, but I guess
I mean, last year, for
It was
instance, all of the
last year.
classrooms were at 24 or 25. This year, I mean, we added an extra kindergarten position from last year to this year, so that made a huge difference. So I guess the Peak's main thing is to keep an eye to that, maintain those numbers that we have this year, which is a lot more reasonable and appropriate developmentally. Anecdotally, we heard from other schools, you know, particularly George Mason, where I think it's the philosophical discussion of what a course load is. Is it 120 students spread out over the course load, or is it the physical classrooms where there's a class of 15 or 18 versus a class of 28 or 29? So I think that's not necessarily a budget thing, but it is in the larger scope when you look at the class offerings and the teacher workload and that sort of thing.
Right. I mean, high school's different because
course.
you calculate it differently. It's just the way you put it, it makes it sound like, you know, pre-K 12, we are over in most of the classes, and I just don't think that's fair. And I don't think that's what you meant either. So that's my only point.
Yeah, and again, in our discussions, anecdotally, I mean, everybody had a story at a school
Right.
of whether it was an encore classroom or a high school science class or a kindergarten classroom that felt that swell of students. And again, it's not necessarily this year, but it's cumulative over the last several years that at various times, enrollment and distribution and class load being what it is, had a negative impact on instruction.
Right. Okay, and just one question on tuition waivers. Do we not have any tuition waivers now, or do we just not have enough?
It's 30,000.
30,000.
Currently, we have, yeah.
Yeah, because I
We
thought
have
it's sort of
30,000
like
from Virginia Tech and 30,000 from UVA. The tuition reimbursement, probably 7 or 8 years ago when it was in effect, it was $700 reimbursement, and the total pot was $20,000 for the division.
Yeah, no, I just want to make a point that it's not that we're not doing anything, just like on board certification. It's just that we may not be doing as much as people want, but I just don't want to leave the impression that we're not giving tuition waivers.
Right. I know. I think part of the tuition waiver with UVA and Virginia Tech is that correct me if I'm wrong, but the pot has stayed static, whereas the cost of the classes has increased, so therefore fewer people, or there's fewer number of them to go around.
I'd say we've continued to get the reduced rate for being in Virginia. It hasn't changed a great deal. One of the things, and through peak last year, we made the decision to spread it out throughout the entire year so that it's equitable each semester, summer, fall, and spring. And so, yes, quickly, those waivers for that particular quarter or semester goes a lot quicker.
Right.
Before, we would do it summer and fall, and then there would be nothing for the spring. And based on peak's request last year, we did spread it out. So there are about 8 or 9 classes per semester that we're offering.
Thank you.
We're going to probably have to move on to the next. So Che or Mr. Hills?
Go ahead.
Okay. I don't have as many bullet points on mine, but the common theme is investment in human capital among support employees. And to speak to the retention of some of our support staff, specifically bus drivers and part-time employees, there was a request that the health insurance rate be looked at, because apparently the fewer hours you work, the more dollars you pay toward insurance, which seems counterintuitive. And it makes it especially difficult for positions like for school bus drivers who do not, their full-time equivalent is less than the 40-hour full-time work week. So they can never get the same kind of health benefits that an actual full-time employee has, because there's no way that they would be working 8 hours or 7.5 hours a day to do their job. So to look at that, and there's been an issue hiring bus drivers and retaining bus drivers, and that's a big part of that. And if you look at the document, there's a suggestion for how it could possibly be changed. Also, to piggyback on what Dave said about professional development, would like to keep that on your radar, professional development for support staff. Oftentimes, we get overlooked on when it comes to professional development. We just ask that you, when you do talk about budgeting for professional development, that you keep in mind things that we can do to grow in our positions. And going on to the restoration of paraprofessional workdays. So Dr. Noonan, the figure that you're giving, the $221,000 for the 8-hour day, were you looking at all the paraprofessionals in the school system?
Looking at all
For
the
that?
7.5 hour ones.
All the 7.5-hour employees, yeah.
Because that, from what I understand, not all paraprofessionals in other schools want to go to the 8-hour workday, but at Mount Daniel and at TJ, we very much need that 8-hour workday to support our students. Our students are in our care for 7.5 hours a day, and when you have a paraprofessional who's supposed to support that body, those students, there's absolutely no room in the schedule to prepare for classrooms, to confer with teachers about their student responsibilities, and we're really feeling that in our class right now, and I know that's true across the board. One thing that I ask you to keep in mind when you look at that figure is that budgets have been reduced on the backs of support staff and paraprofessionals specifically for the past few years, because our hours were cut from 8 hours to 7.5, and when we went down to school days, we also lost 2 PAR days. So we lost 2 days' pay along with the half hour a day. So the time that we have to get our work done has decreased, while at the same time, just as Dave said about the professional staff, there's more and more expected of us. We teach right alongside the lead teachers, and we just need those hours in the day. And of course, lastly, we'd like a pay increase. So 3% COLA sounds great. I hope that goes through. And that's all I have.
Sure, you've got a couple minutes.
Questions?
Just a quick question, Ms. Wakely. Could you talk a little bit more about on the 7.5 hours, the restoration of time to 8 hours, the specific, you mentioned at Mount Daniel and at TJ. So you're talking about classroom paras, or could you just sort of expand a little bit on the people you think can't legitimately get their job done in 7.5 hours and for whom an expansion to 8 hours would be appropriate and equitable?
Yeah, specifically kindergarten classroom paras. We need our days to be 8 hours long, but also quite a few special ed paras are responsible for getting their charges off the bus in the morning and then making sure they get on the bus at the end of the day, and that actually goes beyond the 7.5 hours. So we have between, and I understand that's true also at TJ. But with that, currently there are so many donated hours from the paraprofessionals at Mount Daniel that it's going to be interesting what happens once we go to Veritime, using Veritime, because that'll force us to actually work our contract hours, and it'll be pretty illuminating what happens after that. I already know that there are people who plan to come in early and stay late, but clock in later and clock out earlier. So I don't know that that's gonna put us in compliance or not, but.
We won't be able to do that.
Yeah, I would say that's
That's
unethical.
the purpose of
It's a
putting
law.
the Veritime in, is that in order for us to remain compliant with the Fair Labor Standards Act and making sure that our paraprofessionals work the hours that they're asked to work, that's why it'll help us with that. So I hope that you'll let us know if that's happening, because that can't happen.
Okay, that's good. That's good. I'm happy to hear you say that. But again, if we will be forced to comply with that, then we will definitely need to make sure that our day increases to 8 hours, as it was before. I mean, it's always been 8 hours until, what was it, 4 years ago? 5 years ago?
2013, 14, I think.
4 years ago. There was wisdom in that when that was made our contract day.
Thank you.
Matt, Mr. Hill?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to take a moment to thank both Seek and Peak as we support their recommendations made, and thank you for the hard work and time that you spent on putting those recommendations together. My name is Matt Hills, principal of George Mason High School. I represent the administrative and employee committee here tonight, and we do have a few recommendations. Also revolves around kind of what Dave mentioned in terms of compensation, and I'll go ahead and start off by talking about the salary improvement. What we're requesting is a full step on the salary scale, as well as a COLA. I must note that the administrative staff here in Falls Church City has not received a step increase since 2015. One of the goals, as the board is aware, is for SCCPS to recruit and retain the most qualified administrators. These salary improvements are critical to meet the needs of this particular goal. EEC also recommends that the administrative salary scale be adjusted over the next 3 to 5 years to be competitive. And when I say competitive, I'm really referring to the 3 to 5% with neighboring jurisdictions such as Arlington, Fairfax, Loudoun, and also the District of Columbia. Just to give you an example, I attached a table that talks about the differences, and just to do a quick overview, compared to Arlington Public School District, elementary assistant principals earn on average 21% less per year. Middle school assistant principals on average about 15% less per year. High school assistant principals 12 less. Elementary school principals 16%, middle school principals 10%, and high school principals 4%. So you kind of get the idea. And once again, we want to attract and retain the highest quality of school leaders. And in order to do so, we feel strongly that these scales must be realigned. Thank you again for your consideration during what I know is an extremely difficult and challenging budget time.
Questions, anyone? If not, thank all of you for coming out tonight, giving your feedback and information that we'll definitely be taking into consideration as we begin this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, I'd like to invite up our school-affiliated organization representatives that are here tonight to the table. So come on up. I think there's maybe 3 of you here. Maybe more?
Okay, we have enough?
Yeah, and one more for you.
A lot of us.
I want to thank you all for coming tonight. We appreciate your time, and I'll let you all sort out who's going to go first.
We should probably do the PTAs as a
Yeah.
group, so it doesn't matter if we go first.
Yeah, we should go.
All right. I'll start as the youngest, not me as the youngest, as the students are the youngest. My name is Laura Downs. I'm president of the elementary PTA. Great to see everyone this evening. Thank you so much for offering us this opportunity. Before I start with my a little bit more of a formal remarks, I did want to get back to the professional development piece. One of the things that all the PTAs do is we have a grant program. And just to let you know, we have set aside, we're not quite as big as the Falls Church Education Foundation, but we try to set aside a couple thousand, $3,000 to $5,000 in professional development grants for our teachers. And going back to the voucher piece, I just want to let you know that we've seen a trend in the past 2 years that teachers are approaching us, which is fine, but just to let you know, applying for grants to help them with tuition reimbursement. So there is a need there, and what we try to do is see, we get a lot of requests for teachers that want to go to conferences. They'll pick up the cost of a flight if we can pay the cost of a registration for the conference. So there is a great need out there for professional development, including the tuition reimbursement for graduate programs. So I just wanted to throw that out there. But again, thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to speak this evening. We saw a couple main themes, which I think the folks before me also echoed. PYP support is a big one for the elementary schools, as well as, again, staffing need and staffing compensation. Really, the top priority in terms of staffing needs is a coordinator who would be solely responsible for PYP coordination for kindergarten through 5th grade, and this person would be shared between Mount Daniel and TJ. Right now, as we always like to take great pride in that we're a PYP, MYP, IB school system, but we don't really, at least at the elementary level, really have adequate support to really get that program up and running and thriving. So we're really looking for a full-time person who can be dedicated to that. Right now, that responsibility resides with the vice principals, and as you can imagine, there are a lot of more pressing responsibilities that they have to attend to. So PYP often gets neglected through no fault of theirs. There's just so many hours in the day. So, and again, teacher training with PYP isn't where it should be because, again, we don't have a dedicated person for that program. In terms of other staff needs, there are really two other staff positions in particular that the elementary PTA would really like to see funded. Right now at Mount Daniel, we have a 0.8 staff member overseeing Spanish, and it's really difficult for her to get to 18 classrooms. So we're really looking to make that Spanish position from a 0.8 to a full-time position. And secondly, Jesse Thackeray, who I believe has seen the greatest enrollment growth this year. We're really looking for a 0.5 clerical support staff there. They really need the support. They just have a lot of students, and they just don't have the administrative support in that building. And with those being our youngest students, it is a concern. In terms of TJ staffing, Paul Swanson would love to have staff, but there's no room right now, and he doesn't want to put any more Encore teachers on carts. But that does bring up the point of, for this school board to consider, we are going to, in another year or two, we have 2nd grade moving to Mount Daniel. So there's going to need to be lots of discussions of staffing, what's going to be changing, what will be shared. So that's for future discussion. In terms of compensation, again, we fully support some type of compensation increase for our teachers, step cost of living. It was interesting because I'm sure you all heard Governor McAuliffe recently declared a state of emergency for teacher shortages in the state of Virginia. And here we are in Northern Virginia, highest cost of living there is in the state, and it's very competitive to find teachers. So in terms of retaining teachers and attracting new teachers, to have a strong benefits package is really going to be what saves us. So we really advocate for that. And finally, I guess on our wish list, pie in the sky type of thing, Mount Daniel, we really need a STEAM teacher there. There's no sort of STEAM program at Mount Daniel really right now, as well as a special education administrator. I can speak personally, I have a kindergartner who's in a classroom with probably a fourth of the students in that classroom have IEPs, and those needs are increasing. We see it at the Thackeray level, and that's just coming up the pipe, and especially when 2nd grade moves to Mount Daniel, having those positions, STEAM and a special education administrator. So thank you very much.
Questions?
Might be good to hear all 3 PTA folks first and then ask questions together.
Okay, my name is Carolyn Bruce, and I'm the president of the MEH PTA. I did not take this job to speak in public. I hate it. I feel like I'm at traffic court right now, so I'm going to be quick. I will echo everything that Laura said, because a lot of the same conversations we've had with our PTA and also with Principal Hardy have been about compensation and making sure that the staff feel loved and feel like they're in a place that supports them. So that being said, really I just have two things. There are two staffing positions that were actually in the planning models for last year, and they never really made it into the budget. There's a full-time math instructional teacher that you all supported last year and is non-existent at MEH this year. And there's also a half-time counselor that were also in the planning projections from last year and never made it to fruition at the building level. And the reason I think that those two positions are pretty important is I think from Mount Daniel through TJ, you have a reading recovery teacher, you have a math recovery teacher, you have a lot of support in those two buildings, not only for reading, but also for math. And then you end up at MEH, and there is a lot of reading support. There's a reading instructional teacher on staff, but there's nobody for math. And to be able to get those children where they need to be at Mount Daniel and TJ, and then sort of just fall off the edge of the cliff when they get to MEH, I think is concerning. You know, as a teacher, a former teacher, I was one, but also as a parent. And then I would say, in terms of the halftime counselor, that position is, I think, crucial at the middle school because, as you know, smartphones are everywhere now, and more and more studies are showing how they can lead to issues with social issues with kids. And middle school is a year, 3 years that are hard socially anyway. Right now, those instructional positions are being covered by two teachers that are already on staff that are also covering their own personal load, their class loads and everything. So, we had talked, I think Deirdre had mentioned that there should be streamlining and staffing positions, and I think that's a great idea. It already exists for those two positions, and I feel like if you don't sort of honor the fact that they already have a job that they have to carry out, then you run the risk of losing good people at schools because they can't take on more than they already are taking on. So we didn't have any cuts that we could suggest. I know that that's something that you're looking for, but I think we felt like because those two positions were supposed to be there and aren't even there, we can't really advocate for cutting positions as well. And I think that's about it for me.
Hi, I'm from George Mason PTSA, and my name's Christina. I'm actually not the president, I'm the treasurer. So I'm going to speak on behalf of Mary the best I can. I think we all have a lot of commonalities between what we're saying. We definitely support the teacher pay increases, and I would say that would be front and foremost the most important thing to us for the teachers. But because of the budget cuts, I think that you're going to need to rely more and more on the organizations that we represent and look for ways to specifically divert money and funding from these organizations. I know that we focus, again, as they do, on the grants, and if in the budget conversations a particular need could be identified, I do think that the more we can align our membership with the need and the reason for the need, that we could help drive some of those budget shortfalls in areas outside of salaries. We also have re-implemented, like reimbursing them with Staples gift cards and trying to make sure that, they get as much compensation and nothing comes out of pocket. We also are supportive of more ESOL support. I know that that's been a big thing that Mary has been focused on, reaching out to the parents of English as a second language and getting involved with those parents, and so supporting their students more and the parents more is a big focus for George Mason. So just with saying that, I think that the more you can rely on us, I think we do have some opportunities to do some stronger fundraising, and so I think the more you can identify specific needs out of the budget that you can let us know, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for any members of the PTA leadership? Mr. Lawrence?
Just one, and it may not be a question for you so much as Lisa, or simply, we have so many new people, it's about a question of last year. Your comment about, we had a math teacher that the board supported, but it's not there. Was that a matter of, we wanted that going forward, but then it ended up getting cut? It seemed like we supported it, but didn't.
There was in the planning factors, there was a math specialist position there, and over the years, that had been absorbed with an actual content teacher who teaches math, but the math specialist was still listed in the planning factors, so that's what they're referring to.
Oh, okay.
So it
that
wasn't
was-
something that we put in the budget last year, and it wasn't funded.
Oh, okay, that's where my confusion, it sounded like it was in and then it was out, and that sounded odd. Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you all very much. We'll,
Yeah,
like, we'll move on to whoever's,
you wanna go?
whichever.
Good evening. Thank you for hearing all of us tonight. My name is Maria Marcus. I am the president for the Band Boosters Association here, and kind of a unique SAO because we represent students and parents and interests across 3 of our 5 schools. TJ, the band begins in 4th and 5th grade, and MEH and the high school. So I have, and some of our needs vary a bit, and I'm going to try and distill it all down and get it all out as much as I can. There are some commonalities and some overlaps, so hopefully as I speak you'll understand where these are. I'll try to point them out. One of the things that we are excited about this year is, for the first time in about 3 years, or maybe even 4 years, band actually has a designated budget at our 3 schools, and we thank you for that. It's been a while, and our band programs have been struggling for years before that. One of the things to speak about staffing to begin with is at our middle school. Our middle school band right now is at 345 students, and we have 1 director. He is overwhelmed, to say the least. Fairfax County, their general standard, I know for comparison, is once they get to 200 students in band, they hire again for a director. That's what I was told. So we have a situation at MEH that is now reaching kind of critical mass, and we've let it go for these years because we're not funding bands at all. And even though we have some designated funds this year, the funds are low. But what's happening, what we see at a really dangerous level now is our students are disengaging. Our parents are disengaging. I just came from 4 different holiday concerts, winter concerts across the 3 schools. Wonderful, wonderful evenings. Just love it. I love going to those. I love seeing the kids and listening to them. We have fantastic talent and fantastic parent support and community support in this town for the arts and for band in particular. What I saw at TJ was this incredible enthusiasm and kids excited to show off what they had learned so far. What I saw when I got to MEH were children whose needs really weren't being served. And it's starting to show, and that's not a reflection on the instructor we have there. It's simply not possible to put out a quality band program with 1 person to handle 345 students over the course of 2 days. The quality of instruction is going down, and we're seeing for the first time the 9th graders are entering the high school this year. They don't have basic rhythm skills that in the past were kind of a given. And so we're seeing a real problem with that. So as far as staffing is concerned, at a minimum, the request would be for a 0.4 for MEH, and anything else in addition. Right now we have 1 paraprofessional that travels across the 3 schools and handles all 656 children in our bands. And just to provide a little more context, 656 children across grades 4 through 12 in our school system. If you think about children getting off the bus every day, that's 1 in 3 of those children is playing an instrument in our city schools. That's tremendous. It's wonderful. It's part of STEAM. It's the A in STEAM. But what we're seeing is that it's not. it's not being supported by the school system. And after years and years of this, it's starting to tell. And I know it's funny, in a year that after our high school played at Carnegie Hall, it's funny for me to come to you and say, oh, the quality is suffering. But we're looking a couple years down the road, as you all are, and we can see already in the past 2 years that there is definitely a decrease in the quality of the program. So that's where that request comes from. The other big request is for a capital investment budget, which even the high school band director, who's been in the system for years, doesn't remember the last time she had one. So I can't go back enough years to say that. I know in 2011 there was a capital repair budget for the bands. What we're facing is aging instruments that are handled by 3 children a day at our schools, and they're reaching the point where they cannot be repaired any longer, and there are no funds to replace them. We don't even have the funds to repair them. It was heartbreaking to me to listen to one of our high schoolers who went to Carnegie Hall speak about the fact that their instrument couldn't play all of the notes because it needed repair. And that's not a negligence on behalf of any of our directors. They go above and beyond the call to try and keep our materials in tip-top shape and service our students, but they're just, these instruments are expensive, and they require diligence, just like any other investment in our schools. So those are our 2 big asks. Unfortunately, I don't have any place where we saw that we could cut, only because we feel like band has been kind of put off to the side for a few years, quite a few years. And I would ask that in a general sense, as you're going through things, if you would take a look at where all of our funding for STEAM is going, right down to the granular level, so that we see in the schools whether it's really necessary this year to buy that fad or that consumer product that, yes, is STEAM related and has some instructional value, but is that value equal to not replacing an instrument, not fixing an instrument, not adding a 0.4 to instruction at MEH? Is that worth it? Because I realize it's a finite nut. There's no fairy godmother who will come down and deliver us what we really want. But I would ask, as you go through this process, that maybe you take an auditing look at exactly where those dollars are going, and maybe come up within your triennial plan with something that would allow our band directors to plan their own programs over 3 years or 2 years or even 1 year, so that you're saying, okay, this year this is where we're gonna place our interests, and our band directors can count on that, because we're also seeing some morale issues as well. And I think the other teachers spoke about that. When you can't even plan a budget for a year and you don't know, and you're running through your budgeted dollars in the first 2 months of your school year, it's making for a very difficult position. I have more numbers that I can distill down for anyone who would like, but those are our biggest needs right now. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something quick to back up your point. Again, with our grants, we tend to see, I think it's kind of a reflection of what's going on in the school district, because we were getting grant requests just to give money to fix instruments at TJ. So again, it's like, I think that's just, again with the vouchers for the for the teachers, I think those grant applications just show, I think, a reflection of what's going on in our school system. So.
Yes, every year, and I apologize because that is in my notes here somewhere. The PTAs across all of our schools have been filling this gap. Band Boosters is not a particularly well-funded SAO. The PTAs have year on year given out grants to the band program, the music program, places where we can't even fill those needs either. But the basics of the program need to come from the school system. There is no one who can step into the role that the school system should be playing here and take care of it. And that's kind of the gist of what I heard from all my directors, that we're kind of at this critical tipping point here. So thank you.
I'll be really quick. My name is Julie Donnelly, and I am the president of Athletic Boosters, mostly at the high school, but also Falls Church is unique in that our 8th graders are eligible to play on JV teams. So some of the things I'm going to talk about are from 8th to 12th grade. What's interesting about the athletic budget is it changes every year depending upon the number of students who actually pay an athletic fee, who participate. So last year it was $40,000. And that covers basically uniforms and equipment. What I really am here tonight for is to let the board know a little bit about what Boosters does, to let you know how much we actually support the athletic budget. So what happens with Athletic Boosters is we work very closely with the athletic director, with the coaches to find out what they need. And through the generous, the donations of the members of the city, members of our school communities, through our fundraisers, we raise an enormous amount of money to pay for large pieces of equipment, programming, financial aid for students through 8th through 12th grade. So part of the things that we cover are the major equipment. We provide financial aid in the form of athletic fees, personal equipment, sports clinics to students who are facing financial challenges. We fund 7 scholarships for graduating seniors every year. We provide concessions at athletic events, which seems like it's an extra, but all that money goes back into the athletic department. And we provide our coaches with apparel, along with other programs to support the teams. So what I basically want to say to you is much of what we would consider essential to safe athletic experience is not provided by the FCCPS budget, but provided by Athletic Boosters. It's not a criticism of the athletic department. They're amazing. They do amazing things with the small amount of money they have. It's just what the budget reality is. So when at all possible, when the athletic department makes a request, Boosters finds a way to pay for it. We do, as you know, we're constantly having fundraisers, we're concessions, we're out there all the time, and it's because we need to keep upgrading the facilities, equipment, things like that. So I'm going to give you just a few examples of things that Boosters paid for as opposed to FCCPS. The new lacrosse safety nets that go behind the goals, which seem, aren't those nice, but what they do is prevent every other athlete who's out there on the turf field at the same time. We won't sometimes have, 3 or 4 teams practicing, prevents everybody else from, God forbid, getting slammed in the head with stray lacrosse balls. The baseball batting cage practice, the motorized cart that our chief trainer uses to go up and down, take injured athletes, bring down equipment. The lights for the baseball and softball field, which were, very, very expensive, were paid for by Athletic Boosters. And currently, I'm really excited to tell you that starting January, we've been approved by facilities. Boosters is doing a small improvement to the concession stand. There have been some serious issues with sink and plumbing that really are not particularly cleanly, let's just put it that way, in a polite way. And so we're putting in a new sort of kitchen-grade sink and shelving, which will help, especially with fall concessions and football concessions where we generate most of our money. One thing that we also want you to know about is the Bill Rose Fund. And the Bill Rose Fund is the money that we raise to guarantee that any student who wants to participate in athletics can do so. We are absolutely committed to any student, regardless of their ability to pay if they make it onto a team. If they can't afford an athletic fee, we cover it. While the actual number of students who request waivers is small, it's about 31 for the 2016-17 year, the total cost is not insignificant. It was $3,875 in athletic fees, an additional $1,300 for mandatory gear, shoes, team shirts, warm-ups. This also can cover fees for clinics or camps. A lot of our teams now will be playing full year. They'll play off-season in an off-season rec leagues to make sure that they can be competitive during their season. So it's amazing how much, you join one league, you join another league, it's $70 here, $80 here, $90 there. For some of these families, if they can't even afford the athletic fee, they certainly can't afford these other fees as well. So for the 2017-18 academic year, which is not complete, right now there were 27 waivers. So I think we're slightly ahead of where we were from last year. And Coach Braven, who is our athletic director, says that she anticipates that there'll be more waiver requests in the spring. Because the athletic boosters, the athletic department is so dependent on boosters to supplement their budget. You know, our priority and our commitment to you is just to keep fundraising, to keep doing what we do, to keep trying to think of new ideas, new events. The fall festival, to try to do things like that where we generate a lot of money, bring a lot of people in, so that we can take that money and put it towards whatever request the athletic department needs. Because what we don't want to see happen is something breaks that's crucial and there's no money for it. So that's why we're constantly in our fundraising mode. What we're going to try to do as an organization is try to work on, we have a Bill Rose Fund, which is just for that. Try to create a fund that's just for, sort of equipment, capital improvements. And hopefully, our goal and our ask for you is maybe at some point down the road, thinking about creating a budget line for large equipment purchases. I know it doesn't exist. I know why it doesn't exist. But that would be our wonderful pie in the sky at some point. And until that day, we'll keep doing what we do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for anyone? Again, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Very informative and good information to have as we begin the process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for your support, continued support of our students. All right, we'd like to invite up now our advisory committee representatives that are here. So come on up.
All of us at once?
Yeah, just come on up. I think we've got room for everybody. All right, we're waiting on one maybe.
Gifted, talented.
Thank you all very much for being here tonight. I've had a chance to meet all of you at one point or another at your respective advisories, and so with that, we'd love to just turn it over to you. Who would like to go first?
You want to go?
No, feel free.
Okay. So, hello. My name's Jenny York. I'm the chair of the Special Education Advisory Committee. I want to thank you all for having us here. I really appreciate it. I know these are tough times, and you have a huge charge in front of you to try and figure out how to get all the needs to all the teachers, make sure that they're paid well, make sure that all the different groups that are represented here can hopefully get something that they're putting forward as a request, right? But I also, in terms of us, there's two things on my list that I gave forward to, which I think really are already accounted for in the planning factor, which is the where we think we'll probably need a extra teacher at MEH, special education teacher at MEH next year. And then another one is in regards to a psychologist. We've worked hand in hand with our director, Liz Germer, and we really support the request that she's putting forward to the board. We absolutely see a need for them, especially with the changing in the needs of the students. A lot of focus has been on mental health and trying to support students in the classroom who have different issues going on with mental health, and how to provide them the support so that they can continue to access their education and hopefully stay in the building and not need support outside of the school system. So what we can do to help that is huge for us. And with our psychologists, one thing that we thought was really interesting, Liz Germer shared with us, in comparison to other school districts, our planning factor, I guess is the right word for it, is significantly higher than the surrounding districts. So for us, we have one psychologist for every 1,650 students. Comparatively to Arlington Public Schools, they have one psychologist for every 775 students, which is a huge difference. And being able to have that extra psychologist not only helps the students with disabilities, but it also helps students in the MTSS, our multi-tiered systems of supports, to try and give them that support early on and get some interventions in place if possible. So those were two pieces. The third, which is something that came from all of our work with the advisory committee last year, and meeting with the principals and listening to the concerns at the different buildings and where their needs are. And it was part of our recommendation to the school board at the end of last year, and then also it was echoed in the special education audit, the need for more support in the central office for Liz Germer, who, well, for Liz. Anyways, so right now she has a huge job in front of her, and she's unable to really put boots on the ground in the schools due to all of her responsibilities and everything that she's got to maintain. And where we are feeling that is in the school buildings, because our principals are incredibly busy. They don't have time to get into the classrooms and as much as we would like within that special ed domain and provide the support needed to the teachers. We know that our teachers need support with all the different co-teaching models. Inclusion is a huge push for us, and we want to be able to provide those supports and provide them efficiently and in such a way that our students will really benefit from that. But in order for that to happen and in order for that support to be there, we need to have some access to somebody in the building that can help those teachers on the spot, whether it's through modeling, teaching different strategies, sharing different instructional techniques, whatever the case may be, to help them in the moment and in their day-to-day jobs. Even with just trying to support new teachers as they learn the systems within Falls Church City, working with SEAS, which is our IEP program, and the different paperwork. Even an experienced special education teacher coming into this school district, they encounter, the rules are the same, but every district has a different way of managing that information. So even being able to provide the support to the teachers to get them up to speed so that they can provide, efficient plans and for their students. So that was our third request, and probably one of our most important. I know as the committee, it comes up almost every meeting, and it's just something that we really, really think that it would be beneficial. And one of the things I did want to make sure I did take a minute to do is to thank Liz Germer, because I do know that she's put in her, she's not resigning now, but she's going to be retiring, so upcoming retirement. She's been with us for 7.5 years. It has been amazing. She's provided incredible support and growth to the program, which has been wonderful. So she's going to be a huge loss, but also that with that comes opportunity to maybe restructure how our leadership is within the central office and come up with ways to spread out and share some of those responsibilities that she had, so maybe we can operate a little more efficiently and get some more of that support in the buildings on a day-to-day basis, because Lord knows the work that she had to do in the office was incredibly important and needed to be done just as much as what needs to get done in the building. So I think that's pretty much it.
Thank you.
We're going to let everyone go through, and then we'll come back to questions. Whoever wants to go next.
Okay. I have a slide to start with. Picture. Let's see if it works.
I have one job, and push this button.
Was it you? It'll be
That's a good slide.
It's not a very convincing slide.
May I ask the chair for one extra minute? It would. There's a PowerPoint right down there.
Was it in?
Okay, just one slide. And I want to start with this visual because to briefly comment on the broader context of my remarks. So my name is Paul Boson. I represent the LIEP committee, which used to be called the ESOL Advisory Committee. So we're here tonight with my colleague Gabby Sandoz to give a little bit of voice to some people who typically don't have as much voice in this kind of process. These are people who are in some measure of need for support in language of education. So briefly, this is the broader context. We're not here to talk about national politics, but the world's quite different than it was 2 years ago. And if you're an international resident of the United States, whether you're an immigrant or if you're a shorter term resident and international expatriate, it feels quite different being here than it did a couple of years ago. Okay, we're here to talk about the FY19 budget. This is a work session. So what does this mean for Falls Church? So first, Falls Church is a wonderful place. I've been here for 14 years. I love this community, and it's changing. If you look at the population of Falls Church, it's quite different than it was 20 years ago. We don't have time now to look at census data, but I'll look at it, and it's extraordinary what's happening. And that trickles through to our ESOL program in the schools. So 2 years now, I've not looked back. I don't know how far back the district's data goes, but it would be interesting to look at. 2 years ago, there were 198 students who were either in the ESOL program, receiving services, or who you could think of as graduates of the program. That number now is 262 it's a record level. Now, the number of students receiving services this year is not up dramatically. This is a lot of these people are students who are just above the cutoff. But that's important for the third reason that I wanted to start with some comments tonight, which is that as you think about the ESOL program, and there are so many compelling priorities that you all are considering, you have some tough decisions to make. Think about this as a program that serves both students and families. So as you think about the role of public schools in our community, what this program does, it's an illustration of the way that public schools can serve both students and families. And so as you think about not only the students themselves, the 262 students in the district who receive ESOL services, this also impacts families. And in a world where the velocity of our society is changing so dramatically, I mean, think about how if we're parents, think about the way that information flows from the schools. It's really challenging for those of us who have lots of education, native English speakers and the like. It's all the more challenging for the many families in the community that don't have that same background, that are challenged just as we are, and more, by what's happening in the schools, understanding and helping support their students along the way. So for some specific comments about recommendations, I'll hand over to my colleague Gabby Sendos, but we appeal to you to think carefully about this as a priority and think about how we can help the students and families in the community that are in the ESOL program.
Good evening. Thank you all for having us here. My name is Gabby Sendos, and I would like to share some thoughts about 3 recommendations which our committee would like to address current challenges and improve the ESOL programs for Falls Church City Public Schools. The first recommendation regards hiring a full-time ESOL program coordinator, I hope I'm getting my words right, with expertise in teaching English as a second language. 2 years ago or 3 years ago was an audit going on, and as an audit indicates, there is currently no central point of contact to address the challenges of providing resources to teachers and accomplishing outreach to parents of ESOL students. Yes, 3 years ago I was the PTSA president for George Mason, and I have to echo Christina, we had problems to reach out to ESOL parents. But I am also an ESOL parent, so I can speak to that, to why we were not successful to reach out to them. It's very hard when you are coming to a different country and not speak the language at all. Some parents, we know all parents want their student to succeed. We all want that, right? But sometimes it's very challenging for those parents who are coming here. They either don't speak English or they do speak English like I do, but I was unfamiliar with the U.S. School system. So I want to thank Lawrence Webb and Castillo family for helping me to guide me through my son's college process. I was so confused and I did not understand the process at all. I was also scared. I was feeling like I was failing as a parent, not understanding what I have to do to support my student. So for that reason, I think it's extremely important to reach out, to have that coordinator, to reach out to the families, to make them understand how the school system works and how they can help us as educators with their students, right? It's not enough that the teachers are doing their job in school. They are doing a phenomenal job. But if the student goes home and the parent doesn't understand what the student needs to do, it's hard for the parent to follow up what was taught in school. As a second recommendation, the committee recommends establishing a parent resource center a physical space on school property where parents can receive information on how to access different services. Doing so acknowledges the important role parents can and must play in the success of their ESOL students. Since many of these parents are also ESOL, it is vitally important that our system provide easily accessible resources that assist them to participate and encourage their children in educational success. It is not just about our ESOL program provided to students, it's about leveraging each family's contribution to ESOL. The third recommendation related to the support of families is to ensure consistent translation of educational and counseling materials in parents' native languages. I do know, and I do want to recognize that the school does so, but it's in the beginning process, right? And it still needs some more work there. This is necessary to enable their informed involvement in their child's education. Further developing this important resource ensures college and scholarship applications are submitted in a complete and timely manner, thus contributing to the future success of our ESOL student. Going back again to what I just said. While these are additional costs, we do understand that. To each of these recommendations, the result of a more smoothly functioning ESOL program and the resulting success of those who participate can ease the stress on our already overextending teaching staff and become a true source of pride for our exceptional education system. Thank you, and I apologize for my, I have an accent and I'm very conscious about that, so.
You were perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gabby.
And James Weatherly, representing the Gifted and Talented Committee. We really have two recommendations and appreciate the opportunity to make them this evening. Recommendations, one of them is quite specific, the other a bit more general. The specific one is really concerning funding for supplies and materials for the Gifted program at Mount Daniel. We appreciate the fact that this year, for the first time, funding was there is any funding for Gifted materials and supplies at Mount Daniel, because up until this last year there was zero budget for the Gifted specialists there. But even now, kind of the budget is not actually sufficient for the supplies and materials needed for the Gifted program at Mount Daniel. Just so for the day-to-day operation of those classes, they do rely on grants from the PTAs and from outside funding. So would really recommend fully funding the needs for supplies and materials for the Gifted program at Mount Daniel. The second, more general, is to echo a theme that's come up many times through the night, a focus on professional development, but particularly professional development for classroom teachers in the area of gifted education. Because for most of our children that are identified gifted, only a tiny fraction of their time will be with a gifted specialist. And for many of them, they actually have no consistent interactions with gifted specialists. And all the differentiation comes through the classroom teachers. So providing more opportunities for professional development for the classroom teachers who are being expected to deliver differentiated service to gifted students, given the opportunity to actually get the professional development to help to support them in that, we would strongly recommend providing more funding in that area.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for any of our groups? Mr. Lawrence.
Just one. It's keying off something Gabby said, but it's probably a question more for staff. The idea of a parent resource center is a great one. My only question is, should it be at a school? Simply because how much accessibility would there be after hours? Because, as someone who, I work downtown, the chances of me being able to get to a school between 7:30 in the morning and 7 at night is almost zero. So I'm just wondering if we put it there, it would seem convenient, but for the people who really need it, it might be the most inconvenient.
I do understand that, and Ms. High and the committee had the discussion in one of our committee meetings. But if you don't have it on a school property, I don't know where exactly, and I am assuming central office is not going to be a good one, because then you get a lot of traffic of parents coming in and out, and It's just not. And let me be honest with you. As an ESOL parent, you get intimidated. Let alone you don't speak English, and then you meet people you have to interact with. You get intimidated, and it's done. Some people are introverts and they barely speak as they do. So I don't know where exactly that place might be, but I truly believe that a school property will be best instead of central office, or if the school board has a better idea where this might.
My thinking about it is, one of the things that we're really committed to looking at is how does the community interface with our schools just generally, particularly with the new high school being built and talking a lot about it being sort of the central hub of the west end of the community for sure. And my thought about it potentially, maybe having an interim spot if we were to have one before the high school's built, and then maybe moving it to the high school would be something to consider. In terms of the timing, I think that I think some of the cost of the program would actually be to staff it with somebody, with hourly staffing. When we staff it, it's completely up to us. So if we wanted to staff it from 5 o'clock at night to 9:30 at night, that would be within the realm of reasonability. But it would be a matter of finding the dollars to staff it and to also create the resources necessary.
That's something that we've talked about extensively in the Special Ed Advisory Committee too, and being able to have that a parent resource for the students. But even so, one of the things that we keep falling back on is we're a small school district, and the pool of people that would be able to get in the door, would that be able to justify the expense of having that, or do we reach out to neighboring districts and use the services that they already have in place that we have access to? However, even looking at it in terms of pairing up and kind of working together and supporting each other in that process, because we would have some crossover, but also some things that are independent of each other, but being able to kind of blend those two together to start trying to encourage more interest and letting people know that it's there. But that's another way to, I don't know.
That's the idea.
And not to extend the conversation too far, and there's been a lot of groundwork done around a lot of the things that you've heard tonight, trying to find some efficient ways to be able to get at some of these requests that we presumed were likely coming. We've been working closely with George Mason University's Department for Family Resources and seeing if they may be able to provide us with some intern support to come over and at least get something off the ground. But the Family Development and Human Services Department there has some access to some potential possible helpers to get some stuff going.
Just one quick thought, Peter, and I was at least on the phone for the discussion that was at the LEAP committee. I think you're absolutely right for the high school when it's done. I just wonder if there's something that could be done around a public library in the interim, because it is open after hours, and while their space is tight there too, particularly if it's just written materials that don't need to be accessed online, it would be something at least to take a look at because of the availability of the building on both nights and weekends.
Yeah, it's certainly something we can look at. The other part of it is I believe the library will be going under renovation at some point. I don't know when. So it'll be
Common
something else
theme.
to sort of, pay attention to.
Maybe it's just a very quick, very quick comment.
Yeah.
Just on this point of the Parent Resource Center, one interesting thing that operates across many cultures is that just at the time that Americans think we're letting go of our kids, middle school, high school, we're letting go, many cultures hold them tighter. So the fact that eventually the center will be in the schools, I think is very important, because symbolically that really runs against the way that we Americans, it's kind of just the way we are. Our kids get to be teenagers, we are less involved generally.
Totally agree.
Just one quick, less a question and more a comment. There's, I think, been a theme that's come out a couple of times this evening, in particular for LEAP and special education, about that we need to, when we think about things like planning factors include the level of central office resourcing. And of course, the board's talked about this over time, and there's always been a focus on making sure we had the people in the classrooms to keep class sizes small. But and last year we fought, long and hard to get a couple of additional custodians out in the schools. I really want to make sure that we don't overemphasize class size, as important as class size is, towards not providing classroom teachers with the central office and other support that they need, because having classroom teachers doing something that could be done much more efficiently in central office strikes me as a poor use of their time and a disservice to students. And so I don't have a good answer for that, other than to say I think it's something that we really need to take as close a look as possible in this budget.
I'm going to agree with you on that. Excuse me, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
And this is something that we've been discussing, I think, since I've been on the school board, is defining the central office positions and spreading out all of the work. I know Liz Germer was more than overloaded with the amount of duties she did, and she managed to pull them all off beautifully, but I don't know if we're going to find someone to fill her shoes. And we really have got to start thinking about the people who are supervising our teachers, because that's important too, as well as class sizes. And so I'm in full agreement with you, Mr. Edinger, on that.
So it seems to me, Mr. Chair, that might be a great
I was just going
segue.
to say the same thing into comments. But thank you all.
Say thank you
very
to
much.
all of you for
Don't want
being
you all
here.
to have to sit here.
We appreciate your time and your advocacy.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
This is a great time to segue into comments from board members about what we've heard and any additional comments that you have about prioritization, so that staff can hear that as well, and as we begin to move forward towards the superintendent's budget presentation in January. So
I have to continue. I'm on a roll. Since this is my
Ms.
last
Warren.
meeting, I will be heard. So I'm going to say, and all of the presentations were wonderful, and I wish we had deep pockets to fill everyone's request, but it's just not, it's just reality. It's not going to happen. But there are two things that struck me tonight. One of them was Maria Marcus, and bless her, she's been coming every year asking for, every year since I can remember, coming and asking for funding for the band. And every year the band program gets bigger, yet we're not putting any funds into it. I'm a big proponent of music, and students should all be able to study it. I think studies have been shown it helps with math performance. And some of these students will be going into the arts, and I feel like we need to be able to provide them with a decent program. So I really hope, as I cycle off here, I hope the board considers the band program again, and really think about it, and hopefully offer them some funding. I know funds, are short. We got to spread it around, but this has been an ongoing request that, as far as I know, has not been filled. So the other one is Jenny York mentioned and I know Liz Germer mentioned this too in her presentation on the special ed audit, an additional school psychologist. For many years, mental health has been ignored, not just at the school level, but throughout our country. And we're finally seeing the ramifications of that. And with all the pressures on students and the social media and all the different exposures that our younger and younger students, are all the things that kids are being exposed to nowadays, I think it's important to really consider that position of at least a part-time school psychologist, as well as to alleviate the caseload of the current one. I mean, that's a lot of kids, 1,000 kids. Can you imagine administering to 1,000 kids? I couldn't. I just couldn't. So as you all move forward and I leave after tonight, I hope you all consider those two requests keeps them at the top of your list. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. Other comments?
And tonight, I'm kind of hoping to get some high-level guidance from you as well. Not just sort of on the specifics, but some guidance from you around the numbers that we shared at the beginning. So we know that there's a significant deficit if we want to do a 3% COLA, and we have some of those mandatory costs. Where we might be able to find either some additional dollars in our system, or what your guidance would be in coming out to present a responsive and responsible budget for the school division.
Mr. Castillo?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I think one of the things that we have to do is start a conversation, and I wish there had been other ears in this room to hear what we heard tonight about the needs of the community, because not too long ago we were hearing 3.5% revenue growth from our colleagues in general government. Now it's down to, is it 2? Is that what the number is? And first of all, how did that happen? Second of all, the very clear message that I took away from our joint meeting December 4th with our colleagues on council is, you know, could the schools please just stop growing? And could you please stop needing stuff? And I think we have to have a conversation about that as well, because I think what you heard tonight was not a bunch of gold plating, but a bunch of very real human needs. And the drivers, as you often say, Dr. Noonan, of our budget are largely people-driven. And that's not just on the people who staff the schools, but the people who attend are also people. And I think we have to have a larger discussion about what we in Falls Church are wanting to do here in terms of what our values are and how we express those monetarily within the context of our capital needs. I think one of the conversations we should have is, to the extent there is organic growth, and I would say how much the budget rises or falls is largely a construct. But is a 50-50 split the way to go? What is the growth rate of the city population as a whole versus the school system? And by my lights, we grow at about twice the rate. We have twice as many customers for FCCPS that the city has for population, if not more. And if you look at the marginal cost of additional students, it's a lot higher for FCCPS than it is for the city as a whole. You don't have to buy fire engines at the rate that you have to buy school buses. You can spread those out a lot more evenly. And so, to the extent we're constrained, does it make sense that it be allocated 50-50? And that understanding there's some very real needs on the general government side as well. And then I guess with that comment too, Dr. Schiller last year told us this is our budget, the school board's budget. And so you asked for some guidance, Dr. Noonan, but as you go and develop your budget, what should we be telling you? Should we be telling you build a budget based on the plans that we have in place now? Do you want us to give you some more specifics about balancing salary improvements, class size, and organic growth in things such as music and existing needs such as sports, and the fact that we saw last year materials were a huge hidden issue, and they remain so from what we heard tonight. So as you make your, how do we tell you what choices to be making? Because clearly what we heard tonight is we're going to have to make a lot of choices, most of which will not be good news for the people who receive the news.
I think one of the things that I'd like to get some guidance on is how closely do you want me to hold within that 2% guidance? As I look at the needs of the division, relative to the guidance that we've been given, relative to what we've heard tonight, it's going to be hard to meet the requirements of the school division if we want to maintain a competitive salary structure, if we want to maintain quality materials and programs, and provide some additional supports for our kids with the 2% guidance. So I suppose what I'm looking for is some thoughts from you about whether or not we should maintain that 2% guidance posture, or should we take what was mentioned by Mayor Tarter as this is a good starting point and we go from there. Because I think that perhaps maybe it's a good starting point, but let's go from there and see maybe what would be a little bit more reasonable for us to be able to build a budget on.
Mr. Lawrence, any?
Oh, yes, thank you. Just three things. One, echoing what Margaret said about the band support. Also look at what the foundation has done, because the foundation has given a lot of its own money, and especially from the Todd Hitt Fund for the Arts, to the band. So I think, relatively speaking, the lift to do what the band really needs in terms of, maintenance, upkeep, and new instruments will be a lot less than it would have been 3 weeks ago, because they gave well into 5 figures for new instruments, for upkeep. So that might be something that is a whole lot cheaper than people would expect. One thing I forgot to ask when Jenny was here, and I think she's gone now. One thing we always run into with special ed is there's a question. No, she's hiding. A question of what do we want to do and what's mandated. Like last year, we had a bunch of things that were not optional. So just as you go forward, and I know you probably don't have it now, just again, make it clear, especially for the new people, that certain things aren't optional when it comes to special ed. And we tend to lump them together and then at the end sort of break them apart when we see that certain things really aren't optional. So that's more just going forward. And getting to what Justin was saying, this is your first budget with us. And one reason I voted to have you come on was, you've got the experience, you've got the expertise. The board that's coming as of January 1st should make sure that you give the superintendent his full voice to give you his opinion. I mean, you've come in, we had this referendum, suddenly, 6-cent tax increase. Looking at anything on the operating side over a very small figure is not going to make you popular. But, we also didn't hire you to be popular. So it sort of reminds me, my son's gotten into West Wing and he's watching it. At one point, the President Bartlett, feels like he's not making good decisions because he's going against his instinct, and the motto becomes, let Bartlett be Bartlett. Well, let the superintendent be the superintendent and tell you, separate from everything else, what he thinks we need. Because that's why we hired you. And then after that, like always, make the hard decisions and decide you're going to go for guidance or not. But don't in any way handcuff our new superintendent in any way from giving you a full-throated opinion as to what's actually needed. And then after that, deal with the general government and deal with, whatever guidance there is. But, let the superintendent be the superintendent. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Reidinger?
I think I also have probably 3 relatively quick thoughts. One is, like Mr. Castillo, I think it's your really constitutional duty to tell us what you think we need. And we may decide to ask for less than that because we know it's politically infeasible we may need 8%, right? And that's politically infeasible. We're not going to get 8%. And please don't quote me if Nick is here, because I know we're not going to get 8%.
We'll settle for 7.
I'm just suggesting that, I think it's, as Mr. Lawrence said, you've got the expertise to tell us what you think you need and sort of to rack and stack, right? So I envision something we've done before as sort of a list of priorities with a 2% line and a 3% line, and then we decide what, as the board, because it's going to be the board's budget, what goes in and what goes out, and we may adjust your priorities because we may have a slightly different view. But that's sort of the classical way I would look at it. And I think we ought to own that and have conversations with the city council and make the case and see where we get. The second thing is, you ask a little bit about priorities. I'll tell you frankly, and this is just one board member's opinion, but my highest priority is keeping competitive salaries for the entire staff, not just teachers, but the entire staff. Because I think the board, long before I got here, worked really long and hard to get to a position where we were competitive with Arlington. And we compete with Arlington. So I think it's a matter of equity and keeping the good people that we've got. We want to make sure that we maintain, not necessarily, pay exactly the same, but sort of the, within 3% of what Arlington is doing. I think that's very, very important. The last thing is, and it goes to sort of the general nature of a lot of the requests that we've got. Obviously there are a lot of pieces that come in, and actually the answer to most of them is planning factors, right? But I personally have never been confident enough that our planning factors were independently driven by data, as opposed to occasionally reflecting what we thought we could afford, right? So I'd rather have a planning factor that we're not meeting than a planning factor that's realistic. And so I think there's a real need to go back, and I know you're doing this right now, but as we go through the planning factors, to not sort of pay attention to what our current staffing levels are, but to pay attention to, what do we think the right amount is, or what's the minimum, or what's above the minimum and reasonable for us. And then to take a look at where we are staffed. Because I would almost guarantee you, going back to the comments that were made about Ms. Marcus's presentation, that 345 students for a single band teacher is probably completely ridiculous. And my kids, having gone through the middle school and all of them in the music program, 2 of them in the band, I observed the workload that fell on the band program there, which is very robust, huge number of kids participate in it, and I do think we're probably under-resourcing. And I agree with Mr. Lawrence as well that the FCEF can fund a lot of things in addition, but they can't fund FTE, right? That's our job, to fund FTE. So I would want to make sure that we look at that in the right way. And, going back to the overarching point about planning factors, that we don't continue to always say, well, class sizes are the most critical thing, even if that person would be more valuable, coordinating the gifted and talented program or coordinating the LEAP program, that we make sure we have enough support in the central office so that, morale here is important too. And what we want to do is put the best collection of people together in the guest way. And again, going back to what Mr. Lawrence said, we actually can't tell you that. You've done this for a long time. So I'm more than happy to listen to your expertise about what's the best way to do that. And then I'll fight with the city council and with the members of the, or with the residents of the city to try and get what we need to get the schools what they need. But that's kind of where I come from. I just want to make sure we're doing it in that way.
All right, thank you. And just to say, I spoke with the incoming members, and they will be emailing you with their comments as they've heard a lot of the comments of this evening, and give them a little time to digest and kind of provide you some feedback as you get ready for the presentation. My comments are much has been said, and I agree with. That I think it's up to you to provide us with a budget that is, that provides the school system what it needs. As Mr. Castillo mentioned as well, when I walked out of our December 4th meeting, I walked out with thinking potential at minimal 3%, and then to get back in town to find out 2%. Needless to say, shock is understatement of where I was at, and I understand that we have big capital projects coming up on our side. But yes, we got a $120 million bond referendum to build a new high school, but the school overall operations need to still continue to happen. And 2%, I have a hard time seeing how that works. As I've said publicly with citizens as well as to members of City Council, I understand we're going to be pretty tight over the next few years. But with budget guidance, it needs to be reasonable budget guidance for us to work with, and 2% just is not, in my opinion, a reasonable number. So I strongly encourage you to, as you prepare the budget that you'll present to us, to look at it from a perspective of needs. Because I think we all recognize that this isn't a budget that we're going to go wanting, the gold-plated budget. We just need a budget that takes care of the needs of the schools within the constraints of having several potential capital projects coming online over the next several years. Hearing some of the comments this evening, definitely the common theme was, and I support compensation for our teachers. And I guess for me, it's just figuring out, knowing where we are. I think it's almost, as much as I would like to do STEP and COLA, I think we may be forced into seeing which one of those does the best overall for our staff as a whole. I think we do need to continue to look at the compensation for across the board, not just teachers, but support staff and the administrators in the central office and in the buildings themselves as we move forward with the process. Again, we have teachers who are in the buildings that are doing coordinating kind of work and classroom work. And as much as I think over the years we have, as a board, talked about the staffing levels here at central office, that over 4 or 5 years continue to folks doing multiple jobs and almost burning themselves out, that we do need to, and I think you've started that point, and I think with Dr. Schiller prior to you, started looking at ways to get our staffing levels here in central office to where they need to be, and I think that needs to continue to make sure that we have folks doing jobs that they are designated for them versus having multiple hats that are in completely different and unrelated areas. So I think that's an important something that we need to do. But I think overall, we need to, I would encourage you to present a budget that of needs. We as a board will own that budget, and where we see things that we may have to make adjustments, I think it's incumbent upon us to then make those adjustments and make some, as we all know, as Mr. Reitinger said, some political decisions will have to be made within that process, but I think that's up to us to do that, where I think it's your charge is to present the budget that we need to operate the schools effectively.
I have to echo what Mr. Webb said. I saw that the 2% was funded, was offered for a budget, and I thought to myself, I hope the schools, the students aren't being punished because we absolutely have to build some infrastructure, and the new high school we're building, that's 4 years out or 3 years out. And it's something that has to be done. The high school wore out. It just did. It's just unfortunate that it happened to be this year when funds are low. But we cannot underserve our student population with a 2% budget. And I really hope I will not be on this board to support you, but I will, as a citizen, support your decision, Dr. Noonan. And I hope you push for what we need to keep these schools running the way they are and to take care of our littlest students. It scares me when I looked at that number. So press on.
Helpful. Thank you.
All right. And last thing looks to be on the, I guess that's the guidance we were just doing. And if there are any, Mr. Lawrence?
If you could just lay out for anybody who's listening what the schedule is going forward.
I just turned thank you, John. Projector off.
Yeah, I waited till you did that.
Otherwise, I would project it. But let me pull up the calendar. The first, let me just say, if you have interest in finding out information about the budget, we would invite you to go to our website at fccps.org, and there is a tab called Budget. And as you scroll down on Budget, you will see a picture of yourselves tonight, actually. That went up fast. And then you will also see a budget calendar. And that, let's see, pardon?
At the very top.
At the very top, yep. And so we've got January 23rd is, so after tonight, January 9th is the draft budget presentation and CIP adoption of the superintendent's budget presentation. And then January 16th will be a school board work session. The 23rd is a tentative community budget forum on the superintendent's budget. Then there's going to be a school board public hearing on February 13th. The 20th is our next work session to talk about the adoption. Then there's a regular board meeting on the 13th, April 10th, a budget public hearing on May 8th, and an adoption of the FY19 budget at that point. So that calendar is on the website. We hope that people will go take a look at it. But the next big thing for us is I'll be presenting the budget to the school board on Tuesday, January 9th.
Okay, you mentioned that's also CIP adoption? I thought we did that.
You have not. We did the CIP review. We've been through it, and so it's just a matter of adopting it. We shared it with you as an information item. Or no, did we go through?
No, we
I'm
adopted
sorry.
it.
That's right. That's right. I'm sorry. We did adopt it. So it is just the superintendent's presentation.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sorry. The plan was to have you listen to it and then adopt it, and you guys made the decision to just go ahead and adopt it, which was great.
Any other questions? Margaret and John, it's been great. I'm quite sure and hope as you leave the board and as you see the challenges that we have coming up over the next few months, that we will see you in the citizen roles in front of us, advocating, continuing your advocation.
Well, like Margaret and I agreed, until the ball drops on New Year's Eve, we're still here.
Yes, you are.
We also agreed that we'll be there every week, a public comment, right?
Public comment. And then
You also agreed that I could write your public comment.
We weren't going to talk about that in public.
All right. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.